Calling to order the City of Lawrence Redevelopment Commission. Determining if we have quorum. When we do, we are missing Brian Hicks today, but we do have enough for quorum. First item on the agenda is the approval of minutes. I'm assuming all commissioners have gotten the minutes and had a chance to review them. Are there any questions, comments, or concerns? Can I have a motion to approve the minutes from last meeting?
So moved.
Second? I have a second.
Second.
All in favor? Raise your hand. Unanimous. All right, next on the agenda is approval of claims and purchase orders. We have one voucher today for the amount of $8,346.95. Cam, can you give us a breakdown of what this voucher is?
Yeah, these are invoices for my services under the two engagements that we have. One is the general services, the other is additional matters, and we have a invoice, I think, at the tail end here of engineering services by Hanson for Franklin. I think those are the three items on the one voucher.
We still have quorum.
What's Hanson's?
Hanson Engineering Service. Yeah.
What was Hanson working on?
They were the engineering contractor of record for the Franklin Road design.
Okay, I thought we'd finished with that.
Yeah, I think this is the tail end of it. There was some work relative to relocation or potential right-of-way acquisition, right-of-way engineering that was ongoing. That I think we've squared away and finished up to know where those right-of-way lines need to stop. And this tracked against their not to exceed, or still under. They're still, I think, $20,000 under their not to exceed that was previously authorized.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions, concerns, comments? Claims and purchase orders? Okay, do I have a motion to approve? Have a second? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, next on the agenda, we have the staff report. I think we have a pretty good staff report today.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. President. I think it may make sense, given that we've got some new business at the end, to really go through the discussion points as part of the staff report. So let's do that because they do line up. I will say preemptively, I think I will, once we get there, ask to table the approval of the Edwards agreement for Shadeland Avenue. We've got some comments back now from council that represents Edwards that I think we need to sort through. I'll give you an update about where that stands and what some of those comments are that we'll need to figure out between now and next month. And then the Williams project is what I've recently we've handed out just this evening to you for all to digest. I think we've got some lead time on that one. I believe the property, the real estate transaction, of course, is running in parallel to the grant that we've already authorized. This would just be the agreement under which that grant would operate. I think I wanted to get it in your hands so we can discuss the flow there. So when we get to that point, I'll make sure that that's clear, and then you can all digest the sort of draft grant agreement. And then I think we're fine in terms of timeline to then approve that as a form of the grant agreement at the next meeting. Let's start with the Freegee project as number one. I have put, we have a resolution related to approval thereof. The draft that was circulated of the project agreement incorporates a few back and forth exchanges of the project agreement with 3G's legal counsel. So I think this represents what their comments were, some of which I filtered and rejected and negotiated. So this is kind of what we had wanted to see, which was what are they going to do with our initial draft of the agreement. So this is the current draft for consideration and discussion. Because it came up as I was talking to Commissioner Clifford beforehand, I wanted to point out one thing. You will note there is a change in the company party at the top there. The MACLE Realty is a to-be-formed company that is the vehicle for, I think, just to revert back to one of the reasons we're excited about this project, this will be the first use of one of Lawrence's designated opportunity zones. So MACLE will be the fund that is being created to make the qualified opportunity investment in acquiring and then constructing and owning the property and the improvements that it will then lease to ManWeb Services, which is the operative company that employs people and does mechanical trades. So that
Over to you.
okay,
I have a hard enough time hearing you.
sure. We have a seat. Hence the change there in that entity is to the elements of this project agreement are real estate related, so it governs how it will be transferred, and it will be transferred to MACLE, that will be the owner of the property and the improvements. Hence the change, but again, that is the reason for it. I have a call tomorrow with accountants for ManWeb and MACLE. This is the same company. This is just an offshoot. This is a separate real estate investment vehicle that they're putting together to make the qualified opportunity investment. So that will be the operative company. One of the ways that we've back-ended that what we care about is who operates at the property and who and actually uses it. So we've made it a condition precedent that MACLE will execute a lease for ManWeb Services headquarters prior to, as a condition precedent to closing. We've also put it in the developer obligation section that regardless of who owns the property or what that transaction looks like, and there are business reasons for that on that side, regardless of how that is structured, what we care about, what we're incentivizing is the headquarters of ManWeb Services and their employees with the, I'm still waiting on the median wage number, but we'll plug that in there. That's what we're getting. So we've put that in a couple different places to kind of average out the change to the actual signing party. Let's see. What other questions do you have about the agreement?
So and one of the things we talked about as we went through this is that if at any time we determine that they're not progressing with the project according to the project plan, even if if they're halfway done and they decide this isn't a good deal, we're not going to finish, we'll have the right to go back in and buy the property back from them for what they've got in it. I think how you worded that was the appropriate stuff that we should be buying back and not other.
I think it was fixtures and other permanent
Yeah.
improvements, the sort of fair market value of that. Yeah.
Exactly.
Right.
Now, is that in here where?
Yes. That I don't think that was eliminated.
Can you tell me where that is?
Yeah, let me put my finger on it.
Okay. Well, if you just could make sure that that's in there as you go through your additional, because it kind of concerns me that we're creating an entity that in a sense has no assets other than this. Okay?
Why does that concern you?
And, well, it's like we're already in a situation where we're reimbursing them for assets that we're creating, and we're not going to be buying back if we, those assets that we've in a sense already paid for. Okay?
Yeah,
And I don't want to, what I'm concerned with is that how that's managed and what they do with it can be depreciated. I mean, the asset can be depreciated. If you're dealing with an entity that's been in business since forever, the likelihood of that occurring isn't as great as it is when you're dealing with something brand new, which this entity is.
and I will find that and make sure that we're clear on that. But I think the structure for the buyback, so to speak, if the project were to stall, would be, the reacquisition would be for $1, which is the purchase price of the land,
Right.
plus the fair market value of permanent improvements, which would not include, our reimbursement is limited to site costs that are not part of those permanent improvements. So we wouldn't be paying twice, is the idea. That those reimbursed costs would improve the site, but if we were to have to step back in and buy it back, so to speak, those costs wouldn't be reimbursed. It would simply be the site as it sits. And if there were any structures or foundational elements, there would be a fair market valuation of those actual improvements that are permanent. That would be separate and apart from anything we agree to reimburse. So there's a distinction to be made there between what
And
we're
that's what
buying
I
back.
can't find.
Okay.
And then I can't find anything beyond, if they decide, if for some reason they don't commence the project by a certain date, we would have the right at that point, if they miss that date, to go back in and buy it back. They'd have to sell it to us. And that's clearly spelled out here, but beyond that point isn't.
Yeah, I think the primary check there is prior to closing. So if we were to get to a point where the project's not going to move forward before we transfer the land, we would have, that's why there's some conditions precedent, including the lease and permits and financing and zoning. And so there are a lot that will happen during the due diligence period that if it did not happen, we would cancel closing and never transfer it. So that's the first check, is there's a lot we're going to know by the time we close about what the commitments are on the lease, on zoning, on permitting, things like that that will indicate the project's ready to go. Then there's a post-closing, what's the remedy? And that's what I think is how we've set it up, is that there's a potential to take back the site at $1 plus fair market value of permanent vertical improvements. So I will find that here in the agreement somewhere, but I think that's the remedy pre-closing is that we don't close. The remedy post-closing is that I think we can acquire it back for $1 plus fair market value of what they've actually built.
And ManWeb will own whatever this new entity is called, right?
ManWeb will be a tenant of the new entity.
Will they own, well, they'll be a tenant, but will they own that organization?
No,
They won't. They'll be standing.
it will have a common owner. There will be a common interest there, but ManWeb itself will not be a member, to my knowledge, of MACLE.
Okay. Will officers or interested parties from ManWeb be associated? Will they benefit from this new property entity?
Yes.
And by,
Yes.
okay.
Yes. Right.
So if we would have an issue in dealing with that new entity, is there a way that we can reach through to the ownership? It's an LLC, that new one's an LLC, right? Mm-hmm. Okay. But the LLC, I'm looking for ways we can protect ourselves in this.
Sure. Yeah, and that's always important. Protect ourselves from, I think the answer always varies depending on what it is we want to protect ourselves from.
Losing money.
And losing money in terms of
And then.
Excuse me, Jerry, can you speak up just a little
Oh, I
louder?
sure can. I'm sorry.
It's difficult to hear you.
I apologize. There's two pieces of this in my mind. One is that's our gateway. this is our gateway project. This is going to be the face, if you will, of the trades district. So if there's a problem with it, I want to be able to get it back so that we can do something with it. That's one. And then secondly, I don't want us to lose any money.
Right.
So the property's worth something, but we're also going to have a capital outlay.
Right. And
Okay.
and I think the justification or the basis for how we structure this deal in terms of what we're in for, which is real estate plus the reimbursement of site costs, was partly informed by the fact that we know the site, in order to be developed in really any way, needs to be graded. So I think that it was sort of a
I don't have an issue with the outlay at all.
Okay.
If they do what they're supposed to do.
Yes.
And if they don't do it, I want it back.
Yes.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, I think we're getting to
We
that.
want it back.
I think we're getting to that same sort of remedy, but we would rather take it back graded and improved to the extent that they're going to do with the $300,000 we're
and not
agreeing to
pay for it
reimburse.
twice.
And not pay for it twice, yes. I think we're on the same page there about what the remedy needs to be, is we get it back because it's an important site. If we've already spent the $300,000, we're just getting that back in the form of the site that's already improved to that degree without paying twice. Yes, right. Good point. That makes sense. And that was always the idea, is if it doesn't go, we get it back, but the $300,000 isn't going to something that wouldn't help us market it for something else.
And that's what, I just don't see it in here.
Okay. Well, that had always been part of the deal, and I don't recall in the changes back and forth that it was taken out. So I want to say it's here somewhere.
Well, you know what I'm looking for. Thanks.
Yes, I'll make sure we find it and point it out to you. Yeah. Questions?
Cam, just to be completely clear, and I may have missed this, but ManWeb and Freegee are synonymous, or is ManWeb and Freegee something different? Is ManWeb?
They are. Good point. Let me maybe back up and run through kind of how this will be structured. The owner of ManWeb Services, which has Freegee as essentially a DBA. That's their brand name for it. That's what's on it's what you see on the vans and the trucks, et cetera. The company is actually called ManWeb Services. Okay. Freegee is a trade name that they use. That company, ManWeb, will be a tenant of MACLE, which will take title to the property from the Redevelopment Commission. MACLE is a qualified opportunity fund that is formed at least in part, I think solely, by the owner of ManWeb Services. The managing member of ManWeb Services is the CEO of the company as well. His name is Mike Webster. So he had another company that I think we've talked about this, that he sold. That's his capital gain that will then be part of the qualified opportunity investment. So then they will lease space to ManWeb for its headquarters. They're committed under this to do so for a period of at least 10 years, I believe. So they will, it's what we'll see on the site is the headquarters of Freegee.
Okay.
It will be the headquarters actually of ManWeb because that's the corporate name, and it will be owned by MACLE, which is somewhat immaterial to us because we've obligated them to use it as the headquarters of ManWeb.
That makes sense.
Freegee is going to be on the building.
Yes.
Question on
Yeah, Bruce.
section 6,
Okay.
paragraph alpha 8.
All right. Yes.
That's a pretty absolute statement.
It is. Yeah, I've noticed that. This was, I think, their way to avoid, because I didn't want to agree to defend or indemnify the company against anything related to, we know there's a former gas station on the site. I guess the one upfront clarification I want to make is that petroleum is excluded from the definition of hazardous materials in under CERCLA, the broad federal environmental scheme. So the gas station is sort of separate and apart from this. And we do have phase 1s and phase 2 that indicate that there's not the presence of hazardous materials on the site. So we have the studies that show that this is a safe warranty. This was the compromise to keep from putting the RDC in a position where it was defending and indemnifying should something be identified later. This is just saying, hey, everything we know, we can warrant to you that this has not been used to generate hazardous materials or wastes throughout its history. So I think given what we have in the environmental site assessments, we can make that representation.
Okay. Thank you.
And if it's not borne out to their satisfaction, essentially that means they have an out and don't have to close. Any other questions? Okay, we'll make sure that we insert. I should have the median wage number. I talked to the attorney for Freegee today. I'll have that to insert. I can circulate a final. I think there's some other small things to clean up. I wanted to make sure we had the latest draft to discuss. I can circulate that to you all. And I'll make sure that we point out that there's that clawback provision or that remedy post-closing if the project doesn't go. I guess to that degree, just in terms of update, I will say things have really ramped up. I know they've built the team. Browning will construct the building and is working kind of as an owner's rep in that regard. We know it will be financed and owned by MACLE Realty, essentially, in a combination equity investment as part of the opportunity investment and construction loan financing. Schneider Engineering will be working on the site civil work, engineering, and then Current Architecture is the architect for the project. So they've kept at least a couple of their third-party professional services very local to Lawrence. I think that's intentional. I've talked to representatives of all three of those companies, and they have been activated and are working concertedly toward progress on the site. I think the commitment is very much there. It's good to think about what the clawback is, but I think all the signals that I'm receiving are that this is a go and a priority, and they need to be there because their lease is going to run out, so they need to get the building done, and are pretty excited about utilizing the opportunity zone and having a visible headquarters. So everything seems to be very much on track and working in the right direction from my interactions with the company and its contractors. Just for color, if nothing else, so that you know what my impression is. I would suggest, sorry,
excuse me.
Go ahead.
Based on what you said, then there's a project plan. They're starting to implement it against a plan, right?
They are working toward creating that, yes.
Okay.
That's part of what Browning's role is, and there is going to be certainly some land use consideration here. There will be either a rezoning or a series of variances that will be needed for this project. That's informing the timeline, as is permitting. So we've put them in touch with the right parties, and they are concertedly building the timeline for what construction looks like, including entitlements like zoning considerations and permitting.
So they're starting to hang dates on them.
Yes.
Plan it.
Yes.
Great. Well, as you work with them, Cam, that would be
Yeah.
very interesting.
I will.
The updates.
I will
And,
ensure
we
that
should be
we
able
are
to get to when our disbursements might be required
right.
as soon as we have that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Shovels in the ground by end of year?
Yeah, I think they hope to be able to do a lot of the site work, which that will be the initial stuff that we would pay for yet this year, because they generally think that they have, from a site work standpoint, asphalt plants will close usually in November, so they may or may not catch it in order to get the asphalt down. I don't think they're too worried about that. I think we'll be able to have certainly an announcement this year, and I think we'll see some earth moving in sort of November, December, because they're usually still able to do that and have it ready for asphalt and concrete and things in the spring as soon as it warms back up.
Cool.
That's, from Browning, that's kind of how things are shaken out in terms of schedule, roughly. Be then, I think, a 6-month construction window. So we've obligated occupation by December of 2020. I think they anticipate having the building complete by August or September, frankly.
Very cool.
So with that, and I think there's certainly, I'll make sure that we're pointing out remedies and things before we have it executed, and I can make sure that the entity has been formed. I think they'll probably do that here in the very near future as they finalize putting it together. But I would suggest, just in the interest of time, if you're comfortable, that we might consider that resolution and pass it, allow the president to sign when he is satisfied, and have him pledge to take input from you all to make sure that you are good. But that resolution would then be in hand so that we can keep up with the transaction under new business. We don't have to, we'll wait till we get there, but any issues with that approach?
I don't have any.
Great, thank you. I'll move then to the Edwards project agreement. I think, like I mentioned, this is for 4423 Shadeland. I do have comments back from Edwards Council. We've done a few things, including incorporating some of the commitment terms from, there were a couple of letters that we got, kind of an LOI sense that said, that had some details about what the use would be. I think we're going to put those in the agreement as opposed to having them as exhibits, which in talking to Commissioner Clifford before the meeting, I think he preferred anyway. So I think we'll see that happen. There is some, I think, confusion on Edwards' part about how the 4399 Shadeland comes into play. They have a strong interest in a portion of 4399 Shadeland. Of course, we're a little bit jealous of the strip that controls access to the site behind. We know we've got sewer capacity issues and hurdles for future development there, but we still, I think, should value that control of ingress and egress to a degree. That's fine. I think they really are focused on the fenced portion that abuts the building. There's a weird parcel split there. If you'll recall, we issued a request for proposals on just 4423 and not 4399. Edwards would like us to incorporate 4399 into this project agreement, the portion of it, absent minus 30 feet on the south end, which I think works, but I don't think we can legally do because we have not publicly offered that. The cleanest way would be to either split the parcel and sell it to them as a budding landowner, if the value is low enough that we could do so, or to partner with the Community Development Corporation. It previously expressed a willingness to accept that property, maybe do the split, and pass on that northern portion to Edwards. So some things we need to sort out, I think, long and short of it being, I will ask that we table item number 2 under new business and not consent to the agreement yet. I think we have a deal here. I think we're fairly close, but we need to sort out the 4399 parcel, how that's going to transact before we are able to really finalize the project agreement. The other items are, I think, fairly minor. Land use will be a factor in this case too. It's a special use zoning currently because it had been municipally owned for quite some time. It will need to move to probably C5, but I think they're willing to cross off a lot of uses that we wouldn't want to see that would otherwise be permitted as C5, which is good, but there will be a fleet management component, so that C5 will be important. So they've flagged that for us, and I think in the latest draft comments that I have from them have identified that they're going to cross off a series of uses that we can revisit and see if there are others that would otherwise be permitted as of right under C5 that we could cross off. So I think there will be some coordination on that point as part of the due diligence. And again, we'll continue to work on some aspects of that and talk about it some more and maybe get to approval next month. I think that should work on their timeline too. Any questions about that agreement and the draft that you have? That was just my side, and I think what I got just late yesterday was comments from the other side that will inform kind of where we go from here. But any questions on even the initial draft or the approach?
Only just one comment. Sure. In the, excuse me, and maybe I'm just not up to speed. Do we have a city attorney role being played by someone at this point?
Yes.
Okay, good. So you've got somebody that you can ask to, because when you're working with that, how do we parcel this and break this up? Yeah. Yeah, okay, that's all I need.
And some of that will, if we are splitting the parcel, then we're talking about Marion County and the Plat Committee, and some of that's
Yeah.
downtown DMD stuff, rezoning. Yeah, so some things to sort through. But right, Lawrence does have an acting corporation counsel.
Thank you.
To the extent we need that. So, any other questions about the setup there, or what we might have in terms of comments? Okay, we'll dig back into that next month. I'll sort out some other issues in the meantime. The Williams project, I did want to revisit. Again, I think we've got a window of time here while they work through real estate due diligence on a site before we really need to get this buttoned up. So it's another item that I think I'll ask you to table. But I did circulate a grant agreement, and I want to make sure, even though I know you haven't had time to review it, that A, you have it and can do so between now and the next meeting, but B, you understand kind of how it's set up. Talked about this a little bit. This is based on the City of Indianapolis TIF grant agreement. I've made some changes they're not massive changes, honestly, but things that will fit Lawrence better and identify the Pendleton Pike allocation area, et cetera. The setup, just so we're clear, just maybe this is review, maybe not, the grant that we talked about in the last meeting and authorized of $75,000 for training will actually be granted to an affiliate of Employ Indy, which is a workforce development, a Marion County-wide workforce development agency. They will receive the $75,000. They will administer it for the benefit of Williams Comfort Air for training. It's a good interim check. I mean, that's what Employ Indy does, but it also helps that they will administer and are better equipped than we are to ensure that those costs being claimed for reimbursement under the grant by the company are training related and eligible. So we have a sort of a competent partner that administers those funds and makes sure that training is happening before they pay for the training. So I think it helps us make sure that the money that we're using goes to what we wanted to pay for, which is workforce development. So I think you'll see that as you go through the agreement. If they're just wanted to make sure that we understood the setup so that there wasn't confusion about what's Employ Indy and what's it doing in here. It's really a multi-party agreement. And Develop Indy is not a party to this grant agreement. They're just sort of the front door for setting it up, and they referred it to us. It's really a three-way agreement with Lawrence Redevelopment Commission, Employ Indy, and the company, Williams Comfort Air. So I hope that's clear to you all as you review it. If you have any questions, feel free to contact me. But again, I think we'll revisit that next month. I've asked for an update from Williams. They have a consultant from KSM, Location Advisors, that was part of their approach for the grant. I've asked her for an update on real estate timeline. And so I'll hopefully better know what their due diligence period looks like, if they're under contract on the 59th Street property. Obviously, the condition precedent to this grant is that they locate Lawrence. So we'll want to make sure that's clear. And if there's one area I want to revisit, it might be that as a condition on the grant. That said, the main check will be we won't execute this unless and until we know that they are going to locate here.
So at one point, we were talking about basically or Sunnyside and 59th Street area. Is that still where they're looking?
It's west of Sunnyside, but on 59th, yes.
Okay.
It's the former I-Corps property.
Yeah, that's
If you
what I
go
thought.
through there and see it, it's a large sort of commercial industrial building, some warehouse
We
space.
hold part of that, and then they're going to buy land that's not in the TIF.
No, we don't own any of it.
We don't have any.
And none of it,
Okay.
and none of it is in the TIF,
Okay,
which is okay. Under the redevelopment statute, we can fund training and education activities that benefit the community as a whole, even if it's not touching this physical TIF.
okay, cool. Thank you.
Kind of a broad umbrella there. So,
Kim, could you bring a map maybe next time of like the full scale of that? Where, like, so I know exactly where the boundaries are on that, the property that they're looking at?
the boundaries of the TIF.
No, on the, where they're looking, that I-Core property? Because I know how far back and everything.
Yeah.
Just out of curiosity.
I think you will find it goes back to.
Does it go all the way back to like Kensington Farms? Is it, how deep and big is that?
Oh, I want to say it's interrupted by the railroad tracks.
Okay, that's what I was wondering, how far back it was.
Yeah, I think it would go to the tracks. Those are fairly deep properties, but most of the building is on the 59th Street
Okay.
side. I forget how many square feet are there.
Road.
Okay, I
but
didn't know
it-
how,
I think it's currently industrial
okay,
and had been used for I-Core. Did some manufacturing, I think. This would be office and warehouse. So in terms of concern about adjacent residential, it's actually better. I mean,
that's what I wanted to make sure. Is
yeah, it will be, I think it's screened enough that traffic won't be an issue, but it's actually a lighter use, even if they don't actually rezone it to something commercial. I think it's currently I-2, so
Okay, that's what I was wondering, is how far back it ran and all that kind of stuff, for that reason.
kind of
Thank you.
a downhill change, so to speak. So, great. I think we can move on to new business. The first being resolution number 1, which approves the project agreement. You'll note there's language in this resolution that authorizes the president to execute once satisfied. I think there's a little bit of cleanup yet, but that authority will enable us to keep up and execute when appropriate, and we'll make the proper checks about clawbacks and the entity creation.
You're
That's
asking
all I
us to
have.
look at it and then approve it, right?
I'm asking you, if you would consider approving resolution number 1.
May I have a motion to approve resolution number 1, 2019, with the changes that Jerry suggested and Cam agreed to?
Do we have a copy of the resolution?
Yeah.
I don't know if it's been tabled
I have it.
for
That's
consecutive
what
months.
it's the same one
I
from,
don't know that
okay.
we've circulated it each time,
okay, I know which, yep.
but it is
got
the
sorry.
same
Talked
resolution.
about for a few meetings.
Yep,
I don't have it for you.
You don't have it today, but we had it last meeting and I think the meeting before.
We had two.
I think it goes back a few months, yes.
Could you read it to us?
Probably can.
Sorry. Where it's at.
I have it.
You have it?
You have it? Thank you, Kim.
Okay, that's right.
So, resolution number 1, 2019, resolution of the Lawrence Redevelopment Commission approving project agreement with 3GRC Engineered Solutions. I think that's the trade name again. Whereas the Lawrence Redevelopment Commission is the redevelopment commission of the city of Lawrence, duly organized under Indiana law and owning certain real property, commonly known as 7600, 7602 Pendleton Pike and 4326 Seller Street, Lawrence, Indiana. Whereas the Commission previously adopted a conceptual strategic development plan known as the Lawrence Trades District Plan, which identifies growth in the skilled trade sector as a redevelopment goal for the property and the surrounding area due to the potential for positive economic impact to the city of Lawrence through provision of employment opportunities and new private investment. Whereas the plan further identifies the development of skilled trades workforce as a key objective of the Lawrence Trades District. Whereas the Commission previously offered the property for sale to the public pursuant to a request for proposals, duly published in accordance with Indiana law, and received no proposals. Whereas pursuant to Indiana law, the Commission now may dispose of the property in whatever manner it believes will best accomplish its redevelopment goals, such as those identified in the plan, the Trades District Plan. Whereas Free GRC Engineered Solutions is an Indiana design, build, service, mechanical, electrical, plumbing, and refrigeration company originally founded in 1959 with more than 200 employees. That's defined as the company. Whereas the company desires to construct a new corporate headquarters building consisting of office, a training center, and warehouse prefabrication space, which is defined as the project, on the property and relocate its existing employees. Whereas the company's project costs are estimated to be at least $4 million, and the company is seeking local incentives in the form of reimbursement for a portion of such project costs. Whereas the Commission, in accordance with Indiana Code 36714, has reviewed the details of the project and has considered the benefit it would provide for the city of Lawrence, as well as the redevelopment area and the allocation area where the property is located, and including company's requests for incentives, and has determined that the utilization of cash on hand in the Pendleton Pike allocation area, the Pendleton Pike TIF, fund, in accordance with the terms below, is an appropriate way to support the project, further implementation of the plan, and is in the best interest of the city of Lawrence. Whereas the Commission has also determined that transfer of the project site to the company in order to facilitate the project is consistent with the plan and in the best interest of the city of Lawrence. And whereas the Commission has reviewed the project agreement to be entered between the company and the Commission, and wishes to approve and enter in the same in accordance with its powers and obligations as a redevelopment commission under Indiana Code 36714. Now, therefore, be it hereby resolved by the Lawrence Redevelopment Commission as follows. 1, the Commission approves the project agreement with company and accepts the rights and duties of the Commission enumerated therein. 2, the Commission President and the Commission's Executive Director are authorized to take all necessary and proper action to execute the project agreement, to execute any other agreements or documents ancillary to the project agreement, and to take any and all other actions necessary on behalf of the Commission to effectuate development of the project.
Thank you.
So Cam, can I ask you a question?
Yes.
Do you feel that this resolution still describes the company?
I do. I wonder about modifying the title just to make the company names consistent.
Engineering, fabrication. ManWeb is primarily a services company. Isn't that correct?
Sure.
I mean,
Yeah.
they service what Free Engineering, if you will, does. I mean, they build, let's say at Walmart, they put in a huge custom refrigeration facility, which they did. And then ManWeb maintains it, services it, installs it. Is in consideration what the project agreement says and how the company is, they sold off part of it, right?
Right.
Yeah.
The ammonia part. Yeah.
Should the resolution, as it stands, are you comfortable with the resolution describes? Does it match the project agreement still?
Yeah, I think the tweak would be related to, if anything, related to making the company names consistent, just to avoid confusion. I think we've identified sort of the company still, in terms of what it does or what it will, what we care about, which is employees and trades presence and training, but making the names consistent.
Why we want to do it, that's perfect, okay?
Yep.
But yeah, the other pieces, it doesn't fit.
Yeah, clarifying Free G, ManWeb, MACL, I think that'll help.
Yeah, you got it.
I think we're all saying it's all the same thing, but yeah, if we could clarify Because in some parts of the project agreement, it says ManWeb, and some parts it says FreeG. So yeah, if we just tighten that up on the project agreement and the resolution.
I think it's clear in the project agreement. I think that the distinction is this resolution specifically only mentions pre-GRC engineered solutions. It really should say probably MACLE Realty / ManWeb Services, because those are the operative parties identified in the project agreement. So I want to make that consistent so that we don't pass a resolution that identifies a company that we know is the same but doesn't line up
Right.
when you look at the documents. So that's the clarification. And again, this resolution was the first one of the year, so it goes back a few months, and we've tabled it since, and I've not modified it in relation to this.
Right.
I think we could pass it as modified to reference the parties that are identified in the project agreement, which are, let me find the right one.
Is it-
MACLE Realty LLC and ManWeb Services
So,
Incorporated.
Joe? All right.
So I think
We could pass it verbally.
you can.
You can update the documents, and then we can sign it.
Yeah, I think it would work to have somebody move to approve resolution with the amendment that we clarify the parties to be MACLE Realty LLC and ManWeb Services Inc. as opposed to Free GRC Engineered Solutions.
So moved.
Okay.
Have a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous.
Thank you. I can update the document and circulate.
Oh, we need to sign this. Thank you. Thank you, Doctor.
Then as to item 2, I would suggest that we table consideration of the Edwards project agreement for approval until the next meeting, pending clarification and sorting out comments from the company's counsel.
Motion to approve, motion to table project agreement with Edwards Mechanical and Electrical.
So moved.
Second. I'm sorry, third.
All in favor?
And good. Same for number 3, although I will add one small detail pursuant to an email that I just received from Williams Comfort Airs.
I didn't get you.
Oh, sure. Yeah, moving on to number 3, before I ask you to table that as well, I will update you. I just received an email from the consultant for the company who told me that they have made an offer on the I-Corps property on 59th Street, which offer was accepted. So we do have an accepted offer. I will ask her for further detail about due diligence, timeline, and closing. In the meantime, I think we've got some time to tune up the grant agreement. So I'll ask you to table consideration of that as well.
Okay. Move to table. Where's the second? Okay.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
That's great news.
Thank you, Cam, for the staff report and the new business. Is there any other business to come before the commission?
I would just like to thank my fellow commissioners and the people in attendance, and probably the couple of people watching on Facebook for tolerating me having to bring my son. That's who's behind me making the noises, so if you can't see on TV or on Facebook, but I appreciate you guys being flexible with me. We all know that childcare is really hard to find sometimes, so thank you.
Indeed.
Thanks for saying that.
Got it done.
Next meeting is?
Our next meeting is
It'll be September, it'll be officially fall.
September 24th.
September 24th, 2019.
Thank you.
Do I have a motion to adjourn this meeting?
So moved.
Second.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Meeting adjourned.